back at it again with a short impromptu stream. So, not really going to be doing much for long, maybe an hour and a half or so. Kind of just want to go over a few things I was working on yesterday, as well as test some background features and settings for a few things I kind of played around with too. I've been thinking a little bit more about what I kind of want to work with here. And one of the things I kind of was a bit undecisive with yesterday was the ogres and trolls kind of positioning. I think I'm going to retcon that once more. So we're actually going to put the ogres back in the mountains and the trolls back in the desert. Just because that just feels right to me. And basically the idea with this kind of logic is that yeah, I mean, originally the idea was to have trolls in the kind of harsher environments. And in this case, the harshest environment on this continent is definitely going to be the big, expensive desert it has. And I've personally envisioned ogres as a more kind of mountainous race than a kind of deserty race. And aside from that, I also know I'm going to have other mountainous regions later on, which are going to be a lot more icy. And I think that's going to be a more appropriate location for our kind of mountain trolls there. Now, with that said, therein comes the questions of what I want to do with the giants and drakes. Because the reason I kind of ended up swapping the ogres and trolls around was because of the giants and drakes / dragons, essentially. Because it felt kind of right for me to have the giants and whatnot potentially in the desert in comparison to the dragons and the kind of mountain ranges. And I think I am going to keep that as it is. It just means I need to kind of work around as to why ogres, which in this world I'm loosely treating as descendants of giants, why they're not kind of in the same area. Like, why have they wandered off? And honestly, a desert being a fucking desert is a perfect explanation, so I don't really need to think of it any more than that. Now, outside of that, I've realized one thing I hadn't really done is determined how we're going to be treating undead on this continent. Because we've already established we are going to have some form of underworld within one of the religious cultures here, which will have an impact on how the undead are handled. So I think for now, we're probably going to wait off until we kind of sort those out. Although I do roughly have a few loose things in mind for what we can potentially do with these guys. So with that said, what we're going to do here is finally, for real this time, create a little bit of a area for our central continent in proper. Since I think this current setup is a pretty solid basis for a final kind of rough draft of where what is going to be on this kind of location. I also need to think about these guys, but they're not really going to physically be present anywhere. Cool. So, those two are going in there. The Hall of Mirrors / Sound Reflection Cave or whatever, this could potentially go in the central continent still as well, because I do kind of like the idea of having 2 schools of magic in the central continent. But time stop jungle and the volcano slash kind of glacier area are definitely going to be in the southern and northern continents, respectively. But we'll come back to this at a later point. And you can see here I've got a few rough drafts of some things there. Let's see. So I want to drag a lot of this stuff down. So the elementals themselves, I think I kind of fine, some would be left here for now. Because elementals themselves, I'm not really sure whether I'm treating them as more of a race or a power system or a bit of both. They'll definitely be like their own people with their own kind of world. But for the most part, I'd say it's encompassed of like basic level elementals, which probably aren't really going to have a whole lot going to them. Okay, I don't need anything in there. These I will need. So you can come in here. And then we're going to go grab all of our human cultures in here. We're going to drag those back outside. I think for now, we'll take these out as well. Just because we do need to expand some of those guys a bit more. But okay. And these guys are all gonna come up here. Now, even though none of these other locations are going to be located on the central continent itself, that doesn't mean that none of these kind of cultures will have no interaction with like central continent cultures. I imagine the East and the Center, which is basically the inspiration for Europe and Asia, will definitely have some kind of relationship established, particularly between like the Babylonian kind of merchant guys and whoever's on the East continent. Aside from that, I'm also thinking the Western continent and maybe some of the kind of cultures that aren't located on any continents will have some form of establishment kind of based throughout the world somewhere, and they'll probably have some form of relationship with the central guys as well. But for now, I'm envisioning the northern and southern continents to be more like uncharted, unexplored territory, and maybe the western continent's like the current frontier continent. So all the guys in the center doing their own thing have already established some relationships with the east and have some understanding of the culture there, but they're also kind of exploring the west at the same time. Now, let's drag all these in here. There we go. So, I don't think I really need much of anything else here at this stage. Because we haven't really expanded on most of these in this section. That's just an idea of like what types of actual like intelligent civilized races we might have at places, which is why they're kind of there. Cool. So let's whack all of this stuff kind of in here somewhere. So now that we know we are going to have these other racial cultures on this continent as well, We can also make some quick boards for them too. So we're gonna have the desert trolls, for instance. We're gonna have the mountain ogres. We'll have some kind of goblin swamp. As well as some form of like lizard folk marsh. And again, none of these names are necessarily final. It's just to get the juices flowing, basically. And we wanted some kind of ant people colony. We're gonna have the Wildkin Bear tribe. And we are gonna have like a lot of different like animalistic slash insectoid slash whatever tribes here and there. But I don't want to use too many for the most part, because otherwise they're literally going to be everywhere. So at this stage I'm planning like one kind of major empire on the eastern continent where there's like a whole bunch of them inside of, like maybe the foxes, the wolves, the lions, whatever else, but yeah. Lions are probably going to be more so western. Okay, so the Jura. Let's see. So, the Fae, we're going to have some presence. Elementals, I'm going to put here. So they, again, they aren't really going to have their own cities or anything. But they're important enough to kind of expand on within the confines of the central continent. The undead. Titans and giants. So again, titans and giants themselves may not necessarily be like up and about going around doing shit, but they're definitely going to have some kind of historic culture. Maybe some ancient runes or something like that from the olden days. Now, I think there are some I left out. Let's see what we have here. The orcs. Yes. So these are probably going to be red-skinned orcs. We need the kobolds. Anything else apart from them? Okay. Alright, so we need something for Eldritch beings and whatever kind of influence they may have in the area, as well as the devils. Any kind of like godly deities. The demons. Cool. And celestial slash angels. What else do we have? Okay, so kobolds and Trask. So the Trask isn't necessarily going to be like a race or a culture. It's going to be important enough to like expand on its own. So basically want to have like some kind of mythical beast raid on like every continent if I can. So I'm going to have like Behemoth in the west, maybe Leviathan or Jumunga or something in the north or somewhere else. Leviathan is an interesting one. Mostly because even though it's like considered a legendary beast of the sea, it's also the name of like one of the 7 devil princes in good old Fingo. Okay. Now let's bring these all up. So we've got all our human cultures up here. We also have the mushroom folk, the mycenoids. Some kind of plant folk will be nice as well. So trying to go like land, sea, air in terms of like mammals, then kind of a bit of representation for like insectoids and plant people too. Alright. These notes aren't too important, so I'm just going to hide them off to the side here. That will let me position everything else a little bit better. So ideally, what I would kind of like to do is just put all of these boards kind of aligned in terms of the positioning of where these guys are going to be in relation to the world map, if that makes sense. But that is kind of a lot to work with. So for now, we'll kind of just shuffle them about, get them organized a bit more neatly if we can, although not perfectly. Cool. And now we've kind of got all the pieces on the board. So now we mostly just need to finish kind of like placing stuff and planning things out a bit. So I think one of the things you might start off doing here is I am just going to bring the same screen up in my background notes. So bear with me while I do that. Let's see if it's updated on my back end. While I do that, yeah, so similar to before, what we mostly have been doing is starting small. So we knew we wanted like a wizard nation with a wizard school, so we started with the school itself rather than the nation itself. And building upwards and outwards, we have kind of like figured out these other small pivotal locations. So part of what we're going to need to do is determine what kind of important locations we want within each of these individual areas, mostly because what we're going to end up doing with those is just kind of like working it all together. So I'm kind of just scrolling up and down here, and as I mentioned before, not all of these guys are necessarily going to be physically present on this continent in terms of like having a culture or a city or a region established, but I do kind of like the idea of actually, I've just had a bit of an interesting idea. So originally, what I was kind of thinking was that the the devils slash demons themselves would have like some kind of otherworldly establishment somewhere, like the Abyss slash the Circles of Hell. And while I still think that that might be a fitting way to do things, we still kind of need to think about a way to access these realms within from like the human side, similar to the underworlds. So briefly, when we were kind of expanding on the Greek cultures, what we were doing was, in reference to the underworld, we said maybe there's some kind of like cave that they send their dead down into, and if they're living into those areas, they like die in the process. And the thing about the underworld is that's like where one's soul goes to rest. So if one doesn't go to the underworld, their soul isn't resting. And that kind of brings us towards like more of the undead slash celestial slash demon side as to what happens to these people who die out and about in the world if they don't go to an underworld. And I think I've kind of got an idea for that now. So, devils and gods slash demons and celestials or angels. I'll finalize that at some point. Fight over the souls of the deceased, particularly the ones who don't go to any form of underworld. So what we're going to do is say when someone dies, the demons and celestials go to collect the souls. If the soul hasn't already descended to an underworld. So we're thinking like in terms of like a large scale battle, like a full-on war, when you have like hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of people dying in these large scale conflicts, that's probably going to be like a gold mine haven for these demons and celestials to go and reclaim souls. And basically the idea is that demons want to retrieve the souls of the fallen to eat them and become more powerful. The leftover body becomes an undead, or celestials want to retrieve souls to add them to their angelic ranks to fight back against demons. The leftover bodies do not become undead. Now, yeah, so I'd say demons themselves in that case might be capable of reproducing on their own, but maybe the angels can't. Like with one of the sins being lust underneath the domain of the devils and demons, they probably just have like massive parties in which their numbers end up reproducing naturally. Whereas the kind of angelic beings wanting to revere chastity, essentially, probably don't practice any of those kinds of agencies, which is why they reclaim the souls of the fallen to bolster their ranks at the same time to like fight back against the demons, to prevent demons becoming stronger, and to prevent like undead being produced as a result. And we will say bodies who do not have their souls reclaimed may become higher ranked undead who retain intelligence and personality, and bodies who have their souls in them that are destroyed beyond recognition. Example, burning to death without these souls being harvested or reclaimed by demons or angels, become spiritual undead. And that can kind of be why spiritual undead are a bit rarer there. But I think that's a pretty good premise. So now, I've got to think a bit more about demons, angels, gods, and devils, and how they kind of work at the larger scale. Because I imagine the lower ranked demons, which represent chaos, they would probably like... I'm not sure if they themselves would establish any form of like contract system or something. Like, I don't know if at this stage, if I want demons themselves to be like a contracted power source for mortals. This is mostly because I've already kind of established I want to reference Solomon's 72 kind of demons and the lesser key there to be the demons in this worldview. The problem with that is it involves having 72 forms of power systems, and I think that is unfortunately probably a little bit too much. What I can do is basically have the devils themselves be the ones who form these contracts as some form of power system. So 7 devil lords, or princes rather, make contracts with mortals in exchange for their souls, granting them powers in the process. And the same with 7 angelic archangels, make contracts with mortals in exchange for promising ascension when they fall, granting them powers in the process. So I do kind of want to tie into the deadly sins and the 7 virtues with those power systems, because I do like something kind of like emotional based, kind of like what we touched on when we kind of deliberated with the devil of greed, basically inspiring the Babylonian nation, for example. Now, what else can we kind of work with that? So, do we want to have the 72... Yeah, so we'll have the 7 devil princes with the... We'll make it 7 circles of hell instead of 9, represented by each sin. And then maybe 7 archangels equal 7 realms of the heavens. Each represented by a virtue or something. This may not necessarily be finalized by any means, but for the meantime, it's enough to get us thinking, just so we kind of have something going, you know? Now, apart from that, I need to think more about the rules of the kind of regular angels and demons. So, demons are angels of agents, not angels, of chaos that work under the devil princes. Demons are agents of chaos that work under the devil princes. Let's see. What do we want to do with them? I'm thinking they are often the ones sent to make contracts on the devil's behalf as the underlings. And we are just, again, theory crafting at this stage. We might not even have a... we might not even end up having a connection between these two factors at all. Let's think a bit more about like the soul reclamation aspects. So if the devils make contracts for souls, what would they gain from them? What would they want from them? I would say that they would, again, probably make them more powerful, but that's not really going to do much to like bolster demon rings, for example. So the demons themselves, I'm still kind of tossing up whether I want them kind of separated from each other, because I do like the idea of having the hell separate from the abyss, because the initial idea that I kind of loved for the abyss was basically to have like some giant mega dungeon where you can just like fight hordes and hordes and hordes of demons, so you kind of get to the bottom and slaughter everything. Whereas in comparison, I like the idea of the 7 circles of hell being on the surface / having a connection to the surface. For example, the city of Sin, Babylon, might have a brothel / casino inside where temptation awaits. These are managed by the devils of lust and greed, and those who enter these establishments unwittingly find themselves entering the respective circles of hell. And maybe devils don't necessarily make individual contracts with mortals, but entering these establishments becomes a contract in and of itself. If the devils win the gamble of their contracts, the mortal soul is theirs. If that happens, the mortal becomes a demon that serves the devil. Each devil has a race of demon that serves them. For example, the devil of lust has incubi and succubi. Cool, because I kind of did want incubus and succubus to be a bit separate from the demons. So I want the demons to be more so like original races, if that makes sense. Like some kind of like more Lemia Naga snake hybrid people or something. Whereas maybe I kind of want to more so rely on more traditional quote unquote demons to kind of serve the devils. The lesser devils who serve the devils are the ones who work in their establishments. So this is basically like an interesting way that one could potentially change their race somehow if they wanted to, or whatnot. So the idea is like you have this party of adventurers who go to the city of sin, they find themselves the casino or the brothel, and if they participate in the activities, it basically means their soul is forfeit because they've given into sin within the realm of the devils, and that basically, like, in and of itself is a contract to contract these mortals to these devils. So I do kind of like that, as it yeah, it's a more like interesting twist on the system. It allows me to essentially incorporate the hells into like Pseudo pocket planes and the mortal world itself, and it allows me to keep demons separately who are kind of doing their own thing. So the demons and devils are going to be separate. So we'll say, in that case, we need to think about the Archangel equivalent. Because I imagine that they might be doing some form of similar thing. And I think this is kind of tying more into the Lord of Light aspect I was kind of thinking about before. Rather than having these, this one kind of like godly concept of good, it's kind of split more so into 7 kind of sectors of purity or something, with the virtues there. Now, we'll need to think a bit of the demons and abyss and whatnot separately, but okay, I think that actually might be a good place to wrap up there. I did mention before that this would be a shorter stream. It's mostly for me to kind of just organize that basic stuff and basically test the background setting. So I'm going to leave things here today. Probably won't do any more streaming today, but maybe back day after tomorrow, potentially, or tomorrow afternoon. Goodbye for now.